Hi there, it's Jeanette from Get Geared Up. I thought I'd do some paper walkthroughs in the next couple of weeks. So I'm starting with the summer 2024 paper 11, or we call it paper 1 usually. The first paper in environmental management is either number 11, 12, or 13, depending on where you're taking it in the world. So all can be used for revision purposes. And you often find they're very similar. The 11, 12, and 13 in a series will have very similar themes running through them. So, paper one is the theory paper. It's usually the questions that are requiring you to recall knowledge and information and get it down on the paper. There's a little bit of maths in it sometimes, but paper two is more your application. So, obviously, when you get your paper, you're going to put your candidate name, your centre number, your candidate number. The exam centre will give you those. Use a dark blue or black pen. Please remember to use an HB pencil for diagrams or graphs. It's really easy in exam conditions to make a mistake. And if you do it in pen, you're scuppered because the graph paper is part of the question paper. So you really want to make sure you do it with sharp HB pencils. And don't forget, of course, when you do any diagrams or graphs to do the labeling because it's worth marks. No erasable pens or correction fluid, and don't write in the barcodes. And don't forget to take a calculator. So I've written the answers in. I sat this exam like you would sit the exam. Obviously, I've double checked my answers are correct on the mark scheme, and they are. Phew. Be a problem if it wasn't, wouldn't it? But then what came to me? It's the first thing I think of. But usually they're very led by what would be on the mark scheme because I've spent many years teaching this now and get used to the kind of answers that they're looking for. So hopefully this will be helpful to you as you start revising for your exams. So starting off really nice and easy, igneous and sedimentary types of rock. An example of an igneous rock is basalt or granite. An example of sedimentary is limestone, sandstone, or shale. You're only going to put one. I've given you the options. Now, of course, there are many more igneous and sedimentary rocks out there in the world. But what you have to remember is the exam is a way of finding out if you've learnt what they want you to learn. What they want you to learn is on the specification. It's the guide that teachers get given to tell you what to teach, okay? And I make that very available. Home educators can get it online, obviously. And you need to stick to it to some degree. Often the students that struggle in EM are the ones that have gone overboard in terms of learning tons and tons of stuff that's interconnected and related, but not necessarily on the syllabus or the specification. So try just to get used to doing loads of past papers and learning the mark scheme so you can see how they word things and what kind of answers they're looking for. So igneous is always going to be basalt or granite, sedimentary is always going to be limestone, sandstone, or shale. The formation of sedimentary rock, now it's 3 marks, you need to make 3 separate points. So rock is eroded by weathering is going to be a mark. It's transported and deposited in the sea in layers. That's probably 2 more marks. But just in case, because even I don't know, we can't be sure what the mark scheme is going to be and how it's going to be divided out for the marks. I'm going to then say compacted and cemented together. So I think the key things that I want to point out are keywords eroded. Right, I'm actually going to get a highlighter, I think would be better. No, that's not a highlighter, Jeanette. That's pretty useless, isn't it? Get a grip, Jeanette. You need a highlighter. Where's the highlighter? There it is. Right, eroded, weathering, transported, deposited, layers, compacted, cemented together. Okay, over time through pressure. But these are your key words that you need to know. And I'm hoping that's going to make sense as we go through these papers. Photograph shows irrigation of plants in a field. Well, hopefully you all know what that is. It's trickle drip. You can see that because we've got pipes lying close to the ground. And what's good about trickle drip? I'm doing a science now, obviously, to teach at the same time as doing a paper walkthrough. But basically, less evaporation because these pipes have all got little holes in right by the plants. Water trickles out right near the ground, right near the roots. Less evaporation, so less waste of water. And they're usually controlled by a computer. State two reasons why it's an example of sustainable agriculture. Well, the things I've just told you about. So sustainable means meeting the needs of the present whilst leaving enough for the future. It makes it sustainable because it's efficient. So you're going to say water goes directly to the roots of the plants, so there is less evaporation. Now, it might be you've put that as number one, and then you've put less wastage of water as it goes direct to the roots. That would not be wrong. But the thing to bear in mind when you're doing these papers is if there is a number two or three or whatever, usually it's two, in bold, it means the examiner will mark the first and the second point and ignore the rest. Now, if that meant that you'd put 2 points in this first line, that's fine. You'd get a mark there and a mark there, and they'd ignore the rest. If, however, you got the first bit wrong and the and then you did another one and then another one, and you got the last one right, you'd lose your marks because they will only mark the first two things. So if it's two in bold or any number in bold, they will mark the first and the second or however many. Now, I've given you the options because my first thing is water goes directly to the roots of the plants, so there is less evaporation. But you could say there's less water as wastage of water as it goes to the roots and less risk of erosion because you've not got the water running off over the soil as much. The process that releases water from plant leaves, transpiration, that's part of your water cycle. Now, this is interesting. The diagram shows oil spilling from an oil well into the ocean, okay? So that's made it clear. I want you to think about this because there's always a clue in the picture. And it telling us that it's from an oil well means that this boat is nothing to do with the spill. And it's spraying, isn't it? Something on there. So what's it spraying is going to be the next question. We've got the oil well marked. State the method of dealing with the oil spill shown in the diagram. So please don't just put other things. You've got to look at the diagram. Okay, and there's nearly always, if they give you a diagram, there's a reason for it. There's a clue on it. So it's detergents. I've put spray. You could put spraying detergent, either one. State two, only two, other methods of dealing with oil spills. So that's your booms. Do you remember a boom is like a big inflatable that could go round it to contain it like this? Or it could be a skimmer, which is where you have a boat here and you have a roller off the back and it basically, it's like fuzzy felt, it skims off the oil. So either of those, booms or skimmers. And you can see now with this first paper how you're just regurgitating facts you've learnt. I mean, obviously you've got to have learnt them, but not difficult. State three impacts of oil pollution on marine ecosystems. Well, I can tell you that when we cover marine ecosystems, we learn about phytoplankton, we learn about marine mammals, we learn about fish, and we learn about beaches. So you're going to cover one of them, right? So three impacts. Now, there's so much you could say. It kills seabirds and animals, they can ingest it. It blocks the sunlight and prevents phytoplankton photosynthesizing. It disrupts the food chain. So you could talk about, obviously one part of the food chain. So you can just write disrupts the food chain. You could put damages, kills coral reefs. Sorry, I didn't mention coral. So we learn about coral as well. You could say it damages beaches. I think when you say damages, it's a little bit more less specific. So I go with these three. They would be my main ones. Now, I didn't like this picture. I don't know about you, but I didn't feel it was hugely clear, but I suppose it is. But diagram shows photosynthesis, complete the labels on the diagram. Don't miss these little questions here after a diagram. It's 2 marks. And if ever you see a diagram or a table with a dotted line, they want you to put something on it. So you've got to think about photosynthesis. What do plants do? They take in carbon dioxide. So we're breathing out carbon dioxide, aren't we? And breathing in oxygen because they give out oxygen. So I didn't feel that this bit was particularly clear. But we know they use sunlight in their chlorophyll, don't they? And they make glucose and they take in water. So water and carbon dioxide gives out glucose and oxygen. The fact is the oxygen is clear because it's showing it coming to a human. Therefore, that has to be glucose. The green pigment is chlorophyll. Humans taking oxygen, no kidding. State the process, right? So respiration. Statewide trees are a carbon sink. So you might think, what do you mean? Why are they a carbon sink? All they want is they take in or absorb carbon dioxide. And I'm hoping in an exam, if you got stuck and you couldn't remember the difference between a carbon sink and a carbon store, you would just go, well, it's about carbon. I'll just say they take it in because it's sinking in. Right, bar charts. Bar chart shows the number of active volcanoes in some countries. So what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to look at your scale and you're going to say, right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 small squares makes 20. I'm going over this like you all don't know it, but loads of kids make a mistake on scale. So you do 20 divided by 5. Remember, if you can't do it in your head, there's a calculator in the exam. So it's going up in 4s, which is unusual. So 4, 8. Now, why am I writing it on? Because don't need to, do I? But you know what? I am, because I can't tell you the number of students I've taught that have done this. They've got it right. They can see each little square is 4, and then they've gone 5, 10, 15, 20 and counted up in 5s. I don't know why. Brain fart between doing that and doing this. So I always, even me, but then I am, older and I have memory lapses sometimes, but I always write it on to remind myself. I always write this on the side and then I remind myself. So I know what I'm counting up in, right? I'm going up in 4s. So we've got to complete the bar chart. Chile is 104, so let's get to 100. Oh, well, that's nice because that is 104, isn't it? Now, remember, you look at what they've done. They've done it 1.5 in and 1.5 in from this one. So you need to go 1.5 squares in, and your bar needs to be that width of 2 and then 1.5 in this way. So there's Chile and Ethiopia, 58. Again, that's easy. 40, 44, 48, 52, 56. So 58 is going to be halfway. Done that as best I can, dragging and dropping on a PDF. So there's 58. Now you always get about half a square lenience. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be close. And you would colour yours in. I've done mine on here and on the computer, but you would just shade it like the others. But always make sure they are equal width, please. Make sure they are equal widths and the same distance apart as the other bars. So that applies to whether you're drawing a bar graph or whether you're just adding bars to a graph. Okay? It's got to be uniform, basically. Hopefully that makes sense. Fairly easy, and that was a nice couple of marks. Right, volcanoes erupt when magma rises to the Earth's surface. Let's get a highlighter pen. So magma rises to the Earth's surface from the mantle. Explain. So this means give reasons why, how. Like give reasons. How tectonic plate movement causes magma to rise to the Earth's surface. I've nearly highlighted all of that. Was silly. So first thing I'm going to do is go down to the marks. 4 marks. So I know I've got to make 4 points. In a constructive plate boundary, So here's where you're getting your vocabulary across, guys. So you've learnt the different plate boundaries. So you're going to say in a constructive, I didn't mean to move my highlighting. Let's clear that. So in a constructive plate boundary, the tectonic plates move apart due to the convection currents in the magma below. Magma's molten rock, so it rises to the surface. So you're saying you probably, can't remember the mark scheme, but you're probably going to get 1, 2, 3 marks just for that. You've mentioned that magma's molten rock, so it's fluid, it's moving. You don't say it's a liquid, so it's molten rock. The tectonic plates are moving apart, and you've said why they're moving apart because it's explain how. So they're moving apart because they're being pushed apart at the boundary. Now, I'm not sure in my head when I did this, because I wrote it like an exam paper. I'm like, well, is that going to be all the marks? I kind of think that's only going to be 3, might only be 2. I better put a different type of boundary down because it doesn't say which. So I'm going to do in a destructive, one is pushed under the other in the subduction zone. That's definitely going to be a mark. This melts the rock and becomes magma, which rises to the surface. So I've got, I reckon, 5 marks there. Now, obviously, I can only get 4, but better to write 5 things and only get the full 4 marks than to think you've got 4 marks and turn out that this bit, the boundary bit, wasn't even on the mark scheme. It didn't want you to mention the names of boundaries because we're not mind readers, are we, in terms of what the examiner's thinking of? And as somebody is neurodivergent, that can be really annoying because you're not entirely sure. But just hedge your bets. Put everything down that you know related to it. Right? Oh, it's a volcano erupting. I bet, oh, it's acid rain. So you know your 2 gases that cause acid rain. You know the mix with water vapor in the clouds. And you can see them blowing in the wind. They always give you clues. Well, first off, we've got different eruptions, plume heights and volume. A student concludes that Mount St. Helens has a greater impact than Stromboli. Mount St. Helens, yeah, it's got more than 25 kilometres height and 1 kilometre cubed of material compared with Stromboli, which is much less, isn't it? It says use the data. Okay, now, when it says use the data, it does mean use the data, but it doesn't mean just use the data. Okay, so when it says use the data, it means use it and state it. Now, I think when I looked at the mark scheme, the numbers weren't on the mark scheme this time, but they quite often are, and there's quite often a mark just for putting in this one was this much, but this one was this much. Now it's going to take you 30 seconds to write it. So I strongly advise that you write all of it. You write the facts and you add the numbers to back it up. That way we are not lost if they wanted numbers and you didn't put them. Do you see what I mean? So I've put here, this is how I've done it because I always write the numbers. I always want to use the numbers. The Mount St. Helens, so it says, give reasons for your answer. So Mount St. Helens is greater. Mount St. Helens has a much higher plume height. And then look, more than 25 kilometres compared with 0.01 to 1 kilometre. So here is my data. Now, it doesn't say give the data. It never does. But it often says using figures from the graph or using the diagram or using the graph. And 99% of the time, one of the marks for the answer is using the numbers. And now has a much higher volume of material. Now that might get the mark in itself, but I'm going to put 1 kilometre compared 1 kilometre cubed compared with 0.00001 kilometre cubed. So now here's the thing. I've got my and that's my data. And because it says give reasons and it wants to say whether it's more impact on the environment. So just saying one's got a bigger plume and one's got more volume of material isn't saying it has a greater impact on the environment. The key bit is this so, and I want you to keep using so. Just think of me on your shoulder going, so what? Because they want that extra analysis. So there are more emissions and it travels further, so it has more impact. Now, not difficult to write that last bit. Takes 30 seconds and you're definitely going to get the marks. If you just put the data and it's much higher plume and much higher volume, you might get 2 marks, but you might only get 1. We don't know what's on the mark scheme. So why not just make sure that you're doing the analysis? This is more, so there are more emissions. VEI is the measure of explosiveness of a volcanic eruption. State the VEI for kilo, and you go back up here and you look it up, and then you come back down here and find it on the diagram. The table shows information about 2 earthquakes, A and B. I hated this question, not going to lie. Wasn't sure I'd get any marks. I did, in fact, but I thought it was a really stupid question. So it's 3 marks to say, explain how the magnitude of A compares with the magnitude of B. Well, right, explain, compares A to B. What do you want me to say? Earthquake A has a Richter magnitude of 2. Earthquake B has a Richter magnitude of 4. Earthquake B has double the magnitude of earthquake A. Right. So you're thinking that's not 3 marks. It clearly cannot be 3 marks. So you've got to think, I'm on your shoulder going, that's not 3 marks. What else do you think they might want you to say? Now, personally, I hadn't got a clue what they wanted me to say. I'm looking at it going, well, 1's 2, 1's 4. There's the comparison. 4 is double 2. What do you want me to say? 4 is higher than 2. What else do you want me to say? 2 is lower than 4. It's not going to be worth 3 marks. So you've got to think, okay, well, what are they trying to get to? They're trying to get to that the higher the magnitude, the more impact. So I've said B has a higher magnitude than A, which means so in your head, so what? Which means that there is more risk. I mean, part of me is going, no kidding. Really? Never have guessed. That's really stupid. I promise you it was a mark. And then this bit is that knowledge that if you're going to get an A star or an A, is the bit where you've done the Richter scale. You know that each level's 10 times stronger than the one before. So you do a bit of maths. You go, well, if it's 10 times up every level, if it's 10 times and then 10 times, it's 100 times greater magnitude. So that's where those, so if you get a question that seems really too simple for 3 marks, then it is. And you've got to think to yourself, well, what would Jeanette say about this? And even if you don't know what the answer is, you just go, well, that means that's more risk. That means more people are going to get injured, or that means there's more problems, or that means so much more magnitude, Have a go. Oh, we've got a map and we've got the Galeras volcano. We've got a volcano and we've got roads. Now, my first thought is, before I do anything else, why have they shown the roads? They didn't have to show a map with roads on. They could have shown a map with houses on. They could have shown a map with rivers on. They could have shown a map with mountains on. They've shown me roads. Keep it in your mind. And they've shown me pasto. And it says suggest. Now, when you get a suggest question, it's give your ideas. It's open to interpretation. With the suggest answers in the mark scheme, there are many more different options. So just basically common sense, really, applying your knowledge. Suggest reasons why people living in Pasto are worried about Galeras volcano. Well, why do you think they're worried? It could erupt, but that's not going to get you 2 marks. So it could erupt and what? Well, I figure they've shown roads. It could erupt and damage the infrastructure of the roads, making it difficult to evacuate. That was that's my first thought. I don't know what you're thinking on it, but that's so they live close to the volcano and may not have time to evacuate. The ash cloud could cause respiratory problems. because they've just noticed this is part 4 of this question, and this question has told us about ash clouds. So again, that's something to know in EM, where if you're on part C and it goes part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, I think I was just told us about ash clouds. I'm going to use that. So the ash cloud could cause breathing problems, right? Or diseases. And I've done 3 things because when it's a suggest question, you haven't really got a clue what's on the mark scheme for sure. So again, do 1 more just in case. Because with these questions, they'll just mark it if they've ticked twice, they'll just ignore the rest and carry on. They're not going to sit and read loads. They just want to give you the marks, okay? So they go, oh, yep, tick, tick, and they won't bother with this bit. So it doesn't matter if it's right or that last bit's right or wrong or needed or not. If it's there, you can get a mark. If you don't write anything and the ash cloud causing respiratory problems isn't on the mark scheme, you've lost a mark. So just when it's an open-ended one and there's all these lines, if it's 2 marks, try 3 things. That way you're more likely to get your A or your A star. Volcanic eruptions can cause acid rain. Describe the formation of acid rain. Standard answer, always 4 marks, always going to be, when volcanoes erupt, they release sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides into the atmosphere. That's 2 marks. The gas react with water and water vapour, that's another mark, to create sulfuric acid and nitric acid, that's another mark, and fall as acid rain is your last mark. So I promise you, just learn that. I know they've given you all this space, but you just need this. Acid rain often comes up on the exams. Sulfuric dioxide and nitrous oxides mix with water vapour in the atmosphere. They create a weak sulfuric acid and nitric acid and then fall as acid rain. And you need fall as acid rain. Okay, it's finishing off the answer. You've got to say that because it's asking how it was formed. You need that last little bit as a mark. Suggest why farmers grow crops near volcanoes. The land is rich in minerals and more fertile. Right, now again, really important with these questions is this bit. So they don't need to buy fertilizers. It's 2 marks. This bit is really only 1 mark, okay? It's saying it's rich in minerals and more fertile, but they mean the same thing. I've put it down in both ways because I'm not sure what the examiner is going to use. They might use fertile, they might use minerals. So I'm hedging my bets and putting both. It means the same thing. But I need another mark. And it's why farmers grow crops. So it's what's the point? Farmers want to get a lot of higher yield so that they've got more food or more money. So why do they grow them there? So they don't need to buy fertilizers. So it's always about just developing each point. MEDCs use strategies to manage the impact of earthquakes. Before they happen, explain these strategies. 5 marks, so you're thinking 5 strategies. Now I've put on the Facebook page a 4 to 6 mark question PowerPoint video, and I've put another 5 marker, and I'll do a load more and put them on over the next few weeks. With this one, it's just explain strategies. So strategies to manage the impact of earthquakes before they happen. So land zoning, there's a mark. So that's where areas most at risk use as public parks or not for building on. Secondly, now note please, I use connectives. Now I keep telling you to do this, and the reason is it's telling the examiner that I'm giving you more points. Hey, examiner, look, there's 1 mark, there's the 2nd mark, here's the 3rd mark, etc. You don't want to do firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly, fifthly, but you do want to use them in a way that furthermore and moreover, so that you're really hammering home that you've got all these separate points. Secondly, buildings are made to resist or withstand earthquakes, such as buildings with shock-absorbing foundations or counterweights. I reckon that probably give me a mark. Another way is planning and preparation. Yep. Have advanced warning systems and monitor them carefully. You could talk about how they monitor them. People are trained in evacuation plans and rapid response. with medical care, food, water, and shelters. Now that might be another mark, but look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minimum, and I need 5. But this doesn't take long to write. You've just got to trot it out and try to not waffle. Try to be really clear with each point. You don't need to be writing in incredible English. You don't need to make it, beautiful. You just need to go boom, 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 boom. Try not to do bullet points, but think in bullet points, if you see what I mean. So my brain goes, right, 1, they use land zoning, that's this. 2, they've got earthquake resistant buildings such as the counterweight thingy and the shock absorbing foundations. Don't even need to go into detail about it. Oh, 3, they do planning and preparation, right? Disaster planning, early warning signals, systems, mobile phone signals, systems, where they text people if something's coming, whatever. And then disaster evacuation, because that's planning, isn't it? It's planning how to manage the impact before it happens. Right, typhoons, cyclones, hurricanes, learn these facts. They're again often on the exams. Between 5 and 20 degrees north and south of the equator, 60 meters deep and 27 degrees Celsius. I thought this was not a very nice question. State the month when typhoons are most likely to form. Total number formed, so it's this one here, which is in August. State between which months they reach land. So that's only the grey, dark grey. So that's June to October. Estimate the percentage of the total number of typhoons formed that reach land in September. So estimate the percentage of the total number of typhoons formed that reach land in September. So we've got I figured that was about 0.8. I mean, I don't think that lies particularly straight. I'm doing it on the computer, but roughly 0.8. It's only an estimate. And oh, why is that there? That's meant to be up here. There we go. They've moved. Try and do that there. Does that look straight to you or not? It's very hard to tell that. I'm going to get all ADHD about this. Right. Okay. So I reckoned it's an estimate. Remember, you're not going to spend hours trying to measure it. So I've gone 0.8 out of 4.8 because there's the total number formed and this is the ones that reach land. So it's this out of that, which means divide by. So 0.8 divided by 4.8 times by 100 got me 16.667 and 17% was there. Now, I personally, that's what I would do is do the math and then see if there's a percentage close to it. There will be. So that's why, because it's estimate, it's not entirely accurate, yes? Many typhoons are predicted to reach Japan. Suggest 2 reasons, only 2, why some do not reach Japan. Again, you're like, really? I don't know. I mean, what's the obvious? They change direction because we know they can't really plan for which way they're going to go. When you've watched news channels, you've ever watched them and followed them, they're waiting to see if it hits land or where it hits land and whatever. So it's changed direction at sea, and it could be they haven't got enough energy to remain typhoons and they become storms. Now, I know that because I've watched loads of the programs where they're coming in, mainly hurricanes coming into Florida, and they're downgraded to storms. Do you remember that's because they lose energy because they've got the energy from the evaporation of the water. And then when you go over land, they calm down, don't they? So it just could be that they lose energy. I think majority of students would only probably got 1 mark for that one. But remember with EM, you can still get an A, with like 80%. El Nino. If nothing else, you really need to revise El Nino. There's so many El Nino questions on previous papers. So the diagram shows the change in the surface water temperature in the Pacific in a normal year, the top one, and then in El Nino. They've given you a key with cold and warm water on it. They've explained about the winds and cold water and warmer winter. Suggest how an El Nino year affects the number of typhoons expected to reach Japan. So we know that they're going to reach Japan in this year. The winds are blowing this way, and we've got warm water over here. And we've already said up here, haven't we, that the surface temperature's got to be at least 27 degrees. So we know that. So here they've labelled warm water in the west, and the warm water moves east. So what's the really obvious thing? The water is cooler. So less typhoons in an El Nino year will reach Japan as the warm water moves east. Now, again, it's not cheating to use the information they've given you. Look, oh, that's not the right pen. Go away, silly thing. Right, easterly winds weaken and warm water moves east. The warm water moves east, so the sea is not as warm near Japan. Stating the obvious here. And typhoons need a water temperature of at least 27 degrees. So you're saying it's not warm and they need this. Just in case that's part of the mark scheme. Plus, so it must be a 2 marker, I can't remember now. Yes, it's a 2 marker. So plus, I was like, here, examiner, my second point. The wind is moving east, so the typhoons would move east. So I'm hoping you can see that it's really straightforward if you look at and use the clues on the exam paper. Suggest one impact of the people living in Peru. Well, the winds weakening, the warm water moves over here. That means they're going to have more evaporation. They've got a warmer winter up here, but they're going to have more rain down here. Okay? And we know there's going to be less fish as well. Okay? You know that. Ooh, okay, this one. Now, the mark scheme on this wasn't at all clear. It was badly written. But anyway, the map shows a corridor between the ecological reserves in Nepal and India. There's Nepal. There's India. Here's the reserves in the dark grey, and the light grey is the ecological corridor. And they've given us a road and an international boundary here. So, they've told us that's north, thank you, and each square is 4 kilometres squared. Use the scale here to estimate the area of the corridor. Now it says estimate. So I don't know how you would do it. You could, which I think is what they've done in the mark scheme, count the squares that are full grey and then roughly add up these extra bits. So you could go, where I've put 4, 8, 12, you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And now you add up squares to kind of make holes. So 15, that's roughly 16, 17, probably 18, 19, those 2 bits, 20, maybe 21 or 22, right? I just thought, blow that, it's just more what I'm going to count up in 4s, but I like counting in 4s. So 4, 8, 12, 6, because they're 4 kilometre squares, I'm just doing my work all in one go. Now, the only problem with that was it's a 2 marker and it said show you working. So I ended up going back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, because this one is all of the other bits added up, because on these outside ones, I'm like, well, that's that and that. But so I did 16 times 4, which was 64, which is correct. Actually, what they did on the mark scheme, and I ought to show you, is that they did, instead of doing these, they did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then counted them up. So I've written it as they did it on the mark scheme, and actually what they did was do that sum, whereas I just did it in my head as I went around the diagram. Now, because it says show you working, you should still get the 2 marks for that, but it depends on the mark scheme. So always show you working. So having counted up in 4s, I then had to recount my boxes and do 16 times 4. So with these, you don't have to be panicky about it. They give you loads of leniency. Suggest why an international agreement was needed to set up the corridor shown on the map. Well, it's told us it's on an international boundary. So it's two countries working together. It crosses the border of India and Nepal, or two countries need to work together because it crosses the border. A reforestation program began in 2000 when the corridor was created. Local people were employed to plant trees. Local people have seen an increase in tigers in the corridor. That's good. There has also been an increase in the tiger population in both reserves. Explain the benefits. All right, let's think about this. The benefits, and explain means give reasons, to tigers of connecting by a corridor. Well, they've got more space, haven't they? Basically, if they're all in one place, this is in Unit 9 when we talk about ecosystems and we talk about genetic diversity, don't we? If you trap the tigers in a smaller space, then they can only interbreed with each other, those other tigers that are there. Now, it's likely they're all from the same family line, isn't it? If they are able to get across to another ecological reserve with other tigers, they can breed more widely, so you build up genetic biodiversity or increases genetic diversity. So they have more chance to breed and reproduce, which means there's less risk of extinction. Notice I'm always with an explain question doing either so or which means that. Yeah? So more chance to breed, which means less risk of extinction. Furthermore, my third point, this reduces the risk of inbreeding and increases genetic diversity. Now, I've done that and I've thought, right, will that be it? That seems to be 3 marks in my head. But just in case it's not, what if that's all in clubbed together in one mark on the mark scheme or 2 marks? I better put something else down just in case. And I put also having a large area means there's more prey and more habitat. So I think probably prey is going to be a mark and habitat's going to be a mark. But just in case, let's just put it down in a sentence. I don't get marks taken off for putting too much. Ecotourists visit the reserves to see the tigers. That's my alarm clock going off. Sorry, take my meds. Ecotourists visit the reserves to see the tigers. The ecotourists stay in houses in villages in the corridor. That's good. Suggest reasons why it's sustainable. Sustainable means meeting the needs of the people now, leaving enough for the future. So sustainability is about not using single-use plastic. It's about renewable energies. It's about looking after the environment we live in, not conserving the environment. It's about supporting local communities by income, all of those things. So I've put the tourists stay in the villages, which means, you'd see I use which means a lot. They live with local people, which, because you're continuing to develop it, brings income to local people. So that's one thing. And means less environmental impact than a big tourist resort. So instead of building big hotels, which would damage the environment, they're staying with locals. So it sustains the local livelihoods. The table shows 10 countries with nuclear reactors. State the number of countries that have more than 30. Now, I make marks on the paper. I tick them because do you know how many times people get this wrong by just whizzing through and not noticing? Always at the end when you finish early, because most people do not, under any account, leave the exam early. Do not leave. You go back through and you do all of the maths questions again. You check your graph, you make sure you labelled everything, and then you mark it as if you're the examiner. You go back through all your questions, read the question again, and you go, right, let's see if Jeanette were marking this, how many marks would she give me? And then you count them in your head and go, yeah, that's 1, 2, 3. Okay, I've got that. And you try and add, if you've not got enough, you try and add something, always. And it's questions like this that you think are simple that people mess up because they're rushing. State the fuel used in nuclear reactors, uranium. Why is it non-renewable? Because it will run out eventually, or it's, you could say it's abundant, but will run out eventually. 2 other non-renewables, so only 2, but obviously I'm giving you the option coal, oil, or gas, but it's only 2 of those you need. 2 and only 2 reasons why many countries do not have nuclear power stations. So toxic waste is hard to store. It's a standard answer for nuclear power and remains toxic for hundreds of years. Now, that might be worth 2 marks on a mark scheme. Okay, it could be, but it might not be. It might be 1. So I'm going to put that in 1 and then add another one. There are other cheaper non-renewables available. Now, I know it says only 2, but if this is worth 2 marks, then I'm going to get the 2 marks there and this doesn't matter. If that is only really 1 mark on the mark scheme, because I'm not entirely sure what it'll be, then I'll get both of my marks. Diagram shows nuclear power station generating electricity. Nuclear reactor, condenser, cooling tower, and you can see what's going on here. Describe how this power station generates electricity. You don't need to know any more than saying uranium is used for nuclear fission. You could do fusion. I'm doing fission. The uranium atom splits, releasing large amounts of energy. The heat energy is used to boil water to create steam, which turns a turbine, which turns a generator. That answer is worth more than 3, but that's what I want you to learn for it. So I've put it all down. I reckon you don't necessarily need to even say fission. You could have said uranium atom split, releasing large amounts of energy. The heat energy is used to boil water to create steam, which turns turbine, which turns generator. This last bit is standard stuff for like how we create electricity. And then this last one, oh no, where's my answer gone? Oh, shocking. Sometimes, I don't know if it ever happens to you, I type on PDFs and save them, and the last bit disappears. Like when I do my marking and I send it and it's got no mark on it, and I'm like, well, I just put the mark on, where's it gone? Well, I'll have to do this live. Woo! Right, a student says, building more nuclear power stations is the best way, right? Best way, really? Best way of reducing the world's carbon dioxide emissions. Now, they always go extreme because you've got to give balanced view. And what they mean by balanced view is both sides. Okay, both arguments. And you must reach a conclusion. Okay, really important. Got a bit bold there, haven't I? So to what extent do you agree? Right, 6 marks, goody gumdrops, let's do it. So I somewhat agree. So you're always going to start with, I partially agree, or I fully agree, or, I would always, if it were me, I'm suggesting to you, you go, I somewhat agree. Because we know we've got to do both sides of the argument. Or you could say, I fully support this statement. However, other people think that. You've got to give the other side of it. So I somewhat agree. Nuclear power, and it really doesn't matter what you actually agree with or don't agree with. Personally, I don't. It's not about that. It's about showing the examiner you know both sides. So nuclear power does not produce carbon dioxide. Right, so in my head, I'm going to mark this, right? Oh, I don't want approved. I wanted my tick. Right, does not produce CO2. Whoop, whoop. That's something I've remembered, and it's a mark. It's therefore a better energy source than coal, oil, or gas. Okay, now that might get me a mark, but I'm not entirely sure. It is a well-established technology. That's going to get me a mark. And unlike solar or wind power, it's not weather dependent. Well, I've got 3 marks in 3 lines. I fundamentally want you to try and get 1 mark per line, or 1 mark per 2 lines. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and a bit. So 2 lines should be per mark. If you've written 4 lines and you're still on the same point, you're going off too much. 2 lines max for each point you want to make. Okay, whatever size writing you've got. 2 lines per mark. Okay, so if needs be, on the exam, write 1, 2 in pencil, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then conclusion. Okay, if that helps you. to remember to stop waffling. Okay? The students that struggle will spend the first 5 or 6 lines going on and on and on about the same thing. So, oh, it doesn't produce carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and greenhouse gases are really bad for the environment because they cause the enhanced greenhouse gas effect. And we want to reduce the use of carbon dioxide, therefore, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to get you loads more marks. It doesn't produce carbon dioxide, mark. It's therefore better than. So you do need this bit because so what? Just think in your head, so what? Jeanette's going to be going, so what? Well, because it's better than fossil fuels. It's well established, and unlike solar or wind, it's not weather dependent. Yes? Plus, a small amount of uranium gives a large amount of energy. Oh, goody gumdrops. I know I'm going to get a mark for that. Yay. Well, I'm on 1, 2, 3, 4. I only need, how many more do I need? 2. However, now I get to do, so here's my, however, this is telling the examiner I'm changing tack now because I've got to give the other side. However, many are fearful of nuclear power since there has been 2 major disasters, Chernobyl and Fukushima in 2011. I can't remember the date for Chernobyl off the top of my head. Doesn't matter, it's not needed. Oh, sorry, my alarm's going off from meds. Thought I'd switched it off, but it went to snooze. Hold on. Let me just turn it off and then I'll remember. I have to remember to go and take my meds, otherwise I'll be in trouble. Right. So 2 major disasters in this radioactive leaks can cause cancer. I mean, you could, if you're brave, try and spell leukemia. I've spelled it right. In humans, and leaves the environment radioactive for a very long time. Okay? This means that people are displaced and this means people are displaced, they lose their homes, etc. Does that make sense? Are you kind of okay? So let's count. I'm counting marks. How many people are fearful since 2 major disasters? So I'm going to get a mark for the disasters, and I'm going to get a mark for cancer, and I might get a mark for the whole social situation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I think I'm there. I'm thinking, is there anything else I should have put? Doesn't produce carbon dioxide, better, well established, weather dependent, large amount of energy from a small amount of uranium, fearful of nuclear power, 2 major disasters, radioactive leaks can cause. Right, the last thing I'm going to put, which I always make a statement about when I do nuclear, is furthermore, my connectives, furthermore, toxic waste remains radioactive for hundreds of years and is difficult to store. So I'm now going, yep, whoop, whoop, there's another mark, woo. Okay, it might be 2 marks, but I don't know, so I'm just going to leave it more. So then I'm going to do my conclusion. In conclusion, whilst using nuclear power is good in that it doesn't produce CO2 and will therefore lessen global warming. It has many dangers that mean it isn't the best way to reduce CO2 emissions. The best way might be using less transport, increasing renewable energies, and using carbon capture and storage technology. Right, I've whacked loads on the end there, haven't I? Now, as you can see, I ought to get the mark scheme up actually, oughtn't I? Let me get the mark scheme up. While you're here still, I'm still recording. My brother's going to come home soon and I'll have to stop recording, but for the time being, I am here. And let me just get the mark scheme and double check what it says. Here we go. Right. So 8C. Right, let's remind, let me put it separate so they're like that and make it smaller like that. Where's my paper gone? Where's my other one gone? It's gone there. Let me reduce that. Put them side by side and just see where we're at. So I've shown you where I've thought I've got marks so far. Let's see if I'm right. Sorry. Laptop woes, come on. Right. So full marks, a coherent response is given that develops and supports candidate's conclusion using relevant details and examples. Subject-specific knowledge, used precisely, well-balanced view. Right, so agree is it doesn't produce CO2. Yes, that was a mark. Fuel does not contain carbon. Well, that's blimmin' obvious. Not a fossil fuel. Well, I said it's better than coal, oil, or gas. That might get the mark. Not weather dependent. That's a mark. Established technology. Yes, that's a mark. 24/7 supply. I haven't done those right. So far, I've counted definitely 3 marks, possibly 1 for fossil fuels, mentioning them. Right? Energy dense fuel. Oh, that's a mark. So I'm right here. I'm right here that I've got 4 marks in that bit already. Can you see energy dense fuel means small amount of uranium gives a large amount of energy. So I've got 4 marks already, right? Now let's look at the however bit. Oh, it's non-renewable. Well, that's obvious. I didn't put that, but I could have put that. Limited number of safe sites. Need a large supply of water. Darn it, didn't put that. Waste disposal problem. Yeah, I've put that, haven't I? 1. Risk of radiation leaks. Yes. Now, it hasn't put that can cause cancer. However, this is what we call an indicative content mark scheme, which means that they don't put all of the right answers there. So it doesn't mean that because it's not on there, you won't get a mark for it. And I promise you, I'm going to get a mark for cancer. So let me just pause recording just for 1 minute. All right, I'm back. Sorry, my brother came home just at the moment. I just hadn't finished in time. So I'm pretty sure that not only would I get a mark for the radioactive leaks, but I'd get a mark for the leukemia. And I reckon I'd probably get a mark for mentioning the disasters. But even so, what else do they say? Other renewables are easier. Renewable energies don't produce carbon dioxide and therefore safer. So that's what I've got here. So I've easily got at least 6 marks. I mean, you could only get 6 marks, so I've easily covered it. So again, I want you to see that first off, so you know, if it's indicative content, that's just examples. They can't put every possible thing down on there. They're the kind of things that they expect students to do. So I'm just going to carry on marking this here. Therefore, more dangers, best ways using increasing renewable energies. And they didn't mention carbon capture and storage, but I'm sure that would also be a mark. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I reckon. So definitely 6, right? And with these longer mark questions, do a plan. I mean, I haven't planned because I've been teaching it for years, but do a little plan. Jot down everything you can think about. Do a for and against. And make sure then you go through it. And it's a bit like bullet points, but instead of bullet points, you're going to put plus this, however that, and this and that. So you're just making it seem like it's a paragraph. I really hope that's been helpful. Gosh, I've got a busy week this week with it being my birthday, but I will get the paper two exam sat tomorrow and we'll post it at some point over the weekend when I've got a minute. Hope it's been useful. If it has, please leave a comment on Facebook. Please share the environmental Facebook group with other people. And please tell people that I'm running a new environmental management live group starting in January for the 2027 exams. And there'll be a new distance learning course to go alongside it. So take care. Have a good one. Bye.